Old man tied 3, helpless, canine German Shepherd puppies to a tree. What this mother bear did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning air hung heavy with mist as Walter Green hobbled along the forest path behind his small cabin. His weathered face showed no emotion, only deep lines carved by decades of hardship and solitude. The old man gripped a frayed rope in one hand and tugged forcefully at the other end, where 3 tiny German Shepherd puppies stumbled and whimpered, their paws barely keeping pace with his determined stride. Walter had found the puppies abandoned near his property line 3 days ago. Their mother was nowhere to be found, and the constant crying had kept him awake for 3 straight nights. His patience had run out. Too expensive to feed, too noisy to keep, he muttered to himself as he ventured deeper into the woods, the sound of the puppies' soft cries nearly drowned by the rustling leaves and distant birdsong. Finding a sturdy pine tree with a thick trunk, Walter stopped. The smallest puppy, barely 5 weeks old with oversized paws and ears, looked up at him with trusting brown eyes. Its siblings huddled close, their tiny bodies trembling from both the morning chill and growing fear. Without hesitation, Walter began to wrap the rope around the tree, securing each puppy tightly enough that they couldn't escape, but loosely enough that they wouldn't choke. "Someone else will find you," Walter said flatly, though no one was around to hear his weak justification. "Or maybe you'll toughen up out here." The puppies whimpered louder now, confused and frightened as they pulled against their bindings. Their small pink tongues darted out, trying to lick Walter's hands as he finished the final knot, a gesture of affection even as he abandoned them. For just a moment something flickered in Walter's tired eyes. Perhaps regret, perhaps shame, but it vanished quickly. He straightened up with a grunt, his arthritic knees protesting the movement. Without looking back, he turned and began walking away, each step creating distance between himself and the helpless creatures he was leaving to an uncertain fate. As Walter disappeared down the path, the forest seemed to grow quieter. The puppies' whimpers became more desperate, echoing slightly in the morning stillness. They huddled together for warmth, their soft fur matted with tears and dew. The smallest one tried to chew through the rope, but quickly gave up, instead nuzzling against its siblings for comfort. Unbeknownst to the puppies or the now-departed Walter, a pair of watchful eyes observed the scene from deeper within the forest. A large shadow moved silently between the trees, drawn by the sound of distress. Something was coming toward the abandoned puppies, and the forest held its breath in anticipation. In the distance, Walter's footsteps faded completely, leaving only the sound of 3 tiny hearts beating rapidly with fear in the vast wilderness. The minutes stretched into an hour as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The rope bit into the puppies' tender necks whenever they pulled too hard, teaching them a painful lesson in surrender. The largest puppy, with a distinctive black patch over one eye, had initially barked frantically, but his voice had grown hoarse and now emerged as pitiful yelps. The middle puppy, mostly tan with alert ears that twitched at every forest sound, had already given up struggling and lay curled against the tree's rough bark. It was the smallest one, with 4 white paws like tiny socks, who continued to fight, digging at the ground as if hoping to tunnel beneath the rope's reach. A sudden crack of a twig made all 3 puppies freeze. They huddled closer together, their instincts telling them that danger approached despite their limited experience with the wild. The forest, which had seemed empty just moments before, now felt alive with presence, watching, waiting, moving closer with deliberate steps. Emerging from between 2 ancient oaks came a massive brown bear, her fur catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. She stood nearly 6 feet tall on her hind legs, with powerful muscles rippling beneath her thick coat. Her snout twitched as she caught the puppy's scent, and she dropped to all fours, approaching with surprising grace for a creature of her size. The puppies whimpered in unison, pressing their bodies against the tree as if hoping to disappear into its bark. The bear circled them once, twice, her dark eyes unreadable as she assessed these strange creatures bound to her territory. She sniffed at the rope, her hot breath ruffling the fur on the smallest puppy's head. What the puppies couldn't know, what no human observer would have understood, was that this mother bear carried a wound deeper than any physical injury. Just 3 weeks earlier, her 2 cubs had disappeared while she was fishing at the river. Hours of searching had led her to a poacher's camp, where only small tufts of fur and the lingering scent of her babies remained. Since then, she had wandered her territory with an emptiness that even the richest berry patches and fattest salmon couldn't fill. Now, as she stood before these trembling, helpless creatures, something stirred within her, a recognition of vulnerability that resonated with her own loss. The smallest puppy, in a moment of either bravery or resignation, stopped struggling and looked directly into the bear's eyes. Their gazes locked, and in that moment something profound passed between them, a silent understanding that transcended the natural order of predator and prey. The bear's massive paw, capable of killing with a single swipe, reached toward the rope. The puppies squeezed their eyes shut, awaiting the end. But instead of pain came the sensation of movement. The rope was shifting, loosening. With surprising dexterity, the bear's claws worked at the knot Walter had tied, her patience evident as she carefully manipulated the fibers. Meanwhile, less than a mile away, 12-year-old Lily Morgan moved quietly through the forest, her camera hanging around her neck. Homeschooled and passionate about wildlife, she had convinced her father to let her photograph birds near their cabin that morning. She had strayed farther than promised, following the melodious song of a scarlet tanager, when she heard unusual sounds, not quite wild, not quite familiar, coming from deeper in the woods. Curiosity drew her forward, careful to place each step silently as her father had taught her. What she was about to witness would change everything she thought she knew about the natural world, and about the old man who lived in the dilapidated cabin at the forest's edge. Lily crept closer, ducking behind a fallen log as she spotted movement ahead. Her breath caught in her throat at the sight before her. A full-grown brown bear hunched over something small, 3 somethings, in fact, that squirmed at the base of a large pine tree. Her first instinct was to run, to find her father and report the bear's presence. But something about the scene held her in place. This didn't look like a predator with prey. The bear's movements were too careful, too deliberate. Raising her camera with trembling hands, Lily zoomed in and nearly gasped aloud. Puppies. German shepherd puppies tied to the tree. And the bear was... what exactly? Not attacking them, that much was clear. Through her viewfinder, Lily could see the bear's massive claws delicately pulling at a rope, working at a knot with unexpected precision. Impossible, she whispered to herself, but the evidence was right before her eyes. She pressed the shutter button repeatedly, the camera's silent mode allowing her to document the extraordinary scene without disturbing it. Back at the tree, the mother bear had managed to loosen the main knot. The puppies, sensing a change in their circumstances, grew still, their survival instincts telling them that movement might attract unwanted attention from this powerful creature. The bear's breath came in warm huffs against their fur as she methodically worked the rope, her determination evident in the focused gaze of her dark eyes. With a final tug, the knot gave way. The rope fell slack, and the puppies, still too frightened to recognize their freedom, remained frozen in place. The mother bear nudged the smallest one gently with her snout, a surprisingly tender gesture that seemed to say, "Go on, you're free now." The little white-pawed puppy took a tentative step away from the tree, then another. When no punishment came, no yank of the rope to pull him back, he ventured a third step. His siblings watched, learning from his bravery, before the middle one followed suit. The largest puppy, still traumatized, remained pressed against the tree until the bear nudged him too, more firmly this time. Lily's finger pressed the shutter button again and again, her young mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. This defied everything she'd read in her science books, everything her father had taught her about wild animals. Bears didn't rescue puppies. They didn't show compassion to potential prey. Yet here was undeniable proof. A sudden rush of wind brought a new scent to the bear's sensitive nose. Her head swiveled toward Lily's hiding place, eyes narrowing as she detected the human presence. The puppies, sensing the bear's alertness, huddled around her massive paws as if seeking protection from this new potential threat. Lily froze, not even daring to breathe. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind. Never run from a bear. Never make direct eye contact. Never come between a mother and her young. But which were her young now? The bear stood protectively over the puppies, her posture making it clear that she had claimed them in some profound, inexplicable way. For a tense moment, girl and bear regarded each other across the clearing. Then, to Lily's astonishment, the bear made a soft, chuffing sound. Not a growl of warning, but almost a call. She bent her head to nose the puppies forward, away from the tree and deeper into the forest, while maintaining eye contact with Lily as if to say, "You see what humans have done. I am undoing it." One by one, the puppies began to follow the bear as she backed slowly into the trees. The largest one hesitated, looking back toward the path that led to human settlement, but a gentle nudge from the bear convinced him to stay with his siblings. They disappeared into the underbrush, leaving only the discarded rope and paw prints in the soft earth as evidence of the miracle Lily had witnessed. Heart pounding, Lily waited several minutes to ensure the bear had truly gone before she scrambled from her hiding place. She approached the tree, fingers tracing the frayed rope with its hastily tied knot. Who would do such a thing? Who would abandon helpless puppies in bear territory? The cruelty of it made her stomach twist. She retrieved the rope, tucking it into her pocket as evidence, and followed the trail back toward home. But instead of turning left at the fork that would lead to her family's cabin, she turned right, toward old Walter Green's property. She had seen him in town occasionally, a solitary figure who rarely spoke to anyone, and seemed to scowl particularly at children. Her parents had told her to keep her distance, that Walter had experienced tragedies that made him prefer solitude. But if he was responsible for what she had just witnessed, Lily couldn't remain silent. The old cabin came into view, its weathered boards and sagging porch speaking of years of neglect. A thin plume of smoke rose from the crooked chimney, indicating Walter was home. Gathering her courage, Lily approached and knocked firmly on the door. Several moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing Walter's gaunt face, his eyes narrowing with suspicion at the young visitor. "Mr. Green," Lily began, her voice stronger than she expected. "I was in the forest today, and I saw something I think you should know about." "Not interested in whatever critter you spotted, girl," Walter replied gruffly, beginning to close the door. Lily quickly pulled the rope from her pocket, holding it up. "I found this tied to a pine tree about a mile into the woods. There were 3 German Shepherd puppies attached to it." Walter's hand froze on the door, his weathered face revealing nothing, but the slight tensing of his shoulders told Lily everything she needed to know. "Were they yours, Mr. Green?" she pressed. "Found 'em abandoned," he muttered after a long pause. "Couldn't afford to feed 'em. Figured someone might come along." "Someone did come along," Lily interrupted, a mixture of anger and wonder in her voice. "A mother bear. And she didn't hurt them, Mr. Green. She freed them." Walter's expression shifted from defensiveness to disbelief. "Bears don't free puppies, girl. They eat them. If a bear found those pups, they're dead now, and that's nature's way." Lily pulled out her camera, turning it so he could see the digital display. "I have proof." Walter's hands trembled slightly as he took the camera, squinting at the small screen. Image after image showed the incredible scene. The massive bear delicately working at the rope, the puppies huddled in fear, the moment of their release, and finally the bear leading them away like a surrogate mother. "Impossible," he whispered, echoing Lily's earlier sentiment, but the evidence was undeniable. "The bear lost her cubs recently," Lily explained, though she had no way of knowing this for certain. It just felt right. I think she recognized something in those puppies. She knew they needed help, just like her babies did. She took back her camera, looking up at Walter with eyes that held no judgment, only sadness. Even a wild animal showed more compassion than... She left the sentence unfinished, but its meaning hung in the air between them. Walter's face crumpled, decades of hardened emotion suddenly breaking through the surface. He sank onto his porch step, head in his hands. "My Catherine loved dogs," he said, his voice barely audible. "She wanted to rescue them all. After she died, I couldn't bear to look at another one without seeing her face." He looked up at Lily, his eyes red-rimmed. "But that doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing does." Lily sat beside him on the step, this strange alliance of the very young and the very old united by an impossible event in the forest. "Mr. Green, I think you should come with me to find them." "Find them? What for? That bear has claimed them now." "Because we need to make sure they're safe," Lily insisted. And because... She hesitated, then spoke the truth she sensed in her heart. "Because you need to see what compassion looks like again. You've forgotten." Something flickered in Walter's tired eyes, a spark of the man he had been before grief had hollowed him out. Slowly, painfully, he nodded and rose to his feet. "Let me get my coat," he said, "and some food in case we find them." As Walter disappeared inside his cabin, Lily quickly pulled out her phone and texted her father. "With Mr. Green tracking puppies in forest. Important. Will explain later. I'm safe." She knew her parents trusted her judgment, even if they would worry about her unexpected expedition. Walter returned wearing a threadbare jacket and carrying a small backpack. His movements were stiff with age, but there was purpose in his stride now. Without a word, he headed toward the forest path, Lily falling in beside him. An unlikely pair, the grizzled old man whose heart had hardened, and the compassionate young girl whose heart remained open to wonder. "I know these woods better than most," Walter said as they walked. "Been living alongside 'em for 30 years. If that bear has a den nearby, I might know where to look." They followed the path back to the pine tree where the puppies had been tied. Walter stared at the disturbed earth, the claw marks on the tree trunk, physical evidence that the incredible story was true. He knelt with difficulty, touching the indentations in the soft ground. "Big female," he murmured. "Probably the one folks call Old Mama. She's been around these parts for years, never bothered anybody unless they got too close to her cubs." His voice caught slightly on the word cubs, as if sensing what Lily had intuited about the bear's recent loss. They followed the tracks deeper into the forest, moving away from established paths and into thicker undergrowth. The spring afternoon was waning, shadows lengthening between the trees. Lily began to worry they wouldn't find the bear and puppies before dark, and the forest was no place for a young girl and an elderly man after nightfall. "There," Walter suddenly whispered, pointing ahead to a small clearing. Lily froze, following his gaze. In a patch of sunlight, the mother bear sat watching attentively as the 3 puppies tumbled and played around her massive form. The smallest one, brave as ever, was attempting to climb onto her back while the other 2 wrestled with each other in the soft grass. The bear occasionally nudged one with her snout when they strayed too far, guiding them back to the safety of her presence. "I've never—" Walter's voice failed him. He leaned against a tree for support, overcome by the sight. "In all my years—" Lily raised her camera again, capturing this new chapter of the unfolding miracle. The puppies had already lost their fearful demeanor, accepting their unusual guardian with the adaptability of the very young. They had no reason to know that bears and dogs were supposed to be enemies. They knew only that this large, warm creature had freed them from discomfort and was now protecting them. "It's like they're a family," Lily whispered. Walter nodded wordlessly, tears now flowing freely down his weathered cheeks. For the first time in years, the ice around his heart was cracking, allowing long-suppressed grief to flow out and long-forgotten compassion to seep back in. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "We can't just leave them with a wild bear, can we?" Before Lily could answer, a twig snapped beneath her foot. The bear's head jerked up, alert to the human presence. The puppies, sensing her tension, immediately huddled close to her. The largest one let out a small bark of alarm. Old Mama rose to her full height, positioning herself between the puppies and the perceived threat. She did not charge, but her message was clear. These little ones were under her protection now. "Mr. Green," Lily said softly, not taking her eyes off the bear, "I think we need to back away slowly." But Walter stood his ground, his expression a complex mixture of remorse and resolve. To Lily's horror, he took a step forward instead. "Mr. Green," she hissed, reaching for his arm. "It's all right," he said, gently removing her hand. "I need to do this." Keeping his movements slow and deliberate, Walter crouched down to appear less threatening. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a package of beef jerky he had brought for the puppies. Unwrapping it, he placed a piece on the ground and backed up several paces. The bear watched warily, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of the food. The puppies, smelling it too, whined with interest, but stayed close to their protector. "I'm sorry," Walter said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet forest. He wasn't speaking to the bear, not really. He was addressing the puppies, the universe, his long-dead wife, Catherine, perhaps even himself. "I was wrong to abandon you. I've been wrong about a lot of things." The bear tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand the strange sounds coming from this human. The smallest puppy, the one with white paws, broke away from the group and cautiously approached the jerky Walter had placed on the ground. The bear made no move to stop him, merely watching with what appeared to be maternal vigilance. The puppy sniffed the offering, then looked up at Walter with those same trusting brown eyes that had briefly pierced his hardened heart earlier that day. After a moment's hesitation, the puppy picked up the jerky and carried it back to the bear, dropping it at her massive paws in a gesture that brought fresh tears to Walter's eyes. "He's sharing with her," Lily whispered in amazement. "He's treating her like his mother." The bear sniffed the jerky but did not eat it. Instead, she nudged it back toward the puppy, who happily began to chew on it. The other two puppies, seeing that there was no danger, approached as well. Walter slowly placed more pieces of jerky on the ground, each one a little closer to where he knelt. "I think," Walter said quietly to Lily, "that this might be the most important moment of my life." Through her camera lens, Lily captured the transformation happening before her. Not just of a man reconnecting with his capacity for compassion, but of natural enemies finding common ground in the language of caring and protection. The puppies were now halfway between the bear and the humans, no longer afraid of either. The smallest puppy, finishing his jerky, took a bold step toward Walter. The bear made a soft sound, not quite a growl, but a note of caution. The puppy paused, looking back at her as if seeking permission. What happened next would remain forever imprinted in Lily's memory and captured in a photograph that would eventually touch millions of hearts around the world. The mother bear, after a moment's apparent deliberation, rose and lumbered forward, following the puppy toward Walter. She stopped just a few feet away, close enough that Walter could feel her warm breath. The puppies gathered around her legs, looking up at the old man with curious eyes. Walter remained perfectly still, knowing his life hung in the balance of whatever decision this wild creature made. The bear leaned forward, her massive head inches from Walter's face. Man and beast locked eyes in a moment of profound communication that transcended species. Then, ever so gently, the bear nudged the smallest puppy forward toward Walter. The message seemed clear. She was returning what had been callously discarded. "She wants you to take them," Lily whispered, hardly believing what she was witnessing. "She saved them, but she knows they belong with humans." Walter extended a trembling hand, allowing the smallest puppy to sniff his fingers. After a moment, the puppy licked them, its tiny tail beginning to wag. The other two puppies followed their siblings' lead, approaching Walter with growing confidence. "I don't deserve this second chance," Walter murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe that's what forgiveness is," Lily replied, wisdom beyond her years shining in her eyes. "Getting what you don't deserve." The bear watched this reunion for several long moments, her dark eyes unreadable. Then, with a soft chuff that seemed almost like a sigh, she turned and began to amble back into the deeper forest. At the edge of the clearing, she paused and looked back one last time at the puppies now gathered around Walter's knees, as if committing them to memory. Lily raised her camera and captured that final, heart-rending moment. The wild mother saying goodbye to the babies she had briefly called her own, entrusting them to the very species that had both endangered and abandoned them, choosing to believe in the possibility of human redemption. And then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows between the ancient trees, leaving only her paw prints and an indelible mark on the hearts of those who had witnessed her extraordinary act of compassion. Walter gathered the puppies in his arms, their warm bodies wriggling with newfound joy and security. "I think," he said to Lily as they began the walk back to his cabin, "that Catherine would have wanted me to keep these little ones." His voice cracked, "to remember what it means to care for something again." Lily smiled, slipping her small hand into Walter's weathered one as they walked side by side, the puppies cradled in his other arm. "I think she would be proud of you, Mr. Green. And I think old Mama would be too." As they emerged from the forest, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold, as if nature herself was celebrating the remarkable events of the day. A day when the boundaries between wild and tame, between cruelty and compassion, had been redrawn by the most unlikely of heroes. 3 months later, Walter Green's cabin looked nothing like its former self. The porch had been repaired. Flower boxes hung beneath freshly washed windows, and the sound of puppies, now growing rapidly into young dogs, filled the once silent rooms with life. Word of the extraordinary encounter in the forest had spread throughout the small community, first through Lily's photographs, then through local news, and finally reaching national attention when a wildlife magazine published the story alongside Lily's remarkable images. Walter, once the town recluse, now found himself reluctantly at the center of attention. Visitors came to see the bear puppies, as they had been nicknamed, and to hear the tale of old Mama's incredible act of compassion. Some doubted the story at first, but Lily's photographs provided irrefutable evidence of the miracle they had witnessed. The smallest puppy, whom Walter had named Hope, had become especially attached to the old man, following him everywhere and sleeping at the foot of his bed. The other two, Faith and Charity, names that Catherine would have approved of, were equally devoted, their loyalty a daily reminder of the second chance Walter had been given. Lily visited the cabin frequently, her friendship with Walter growing as steadily as the puppies themselves. Her parents, initially concerned about her spending time with the old hermit, had come to understand the profound connection forged in the forest that day. Sometimes Lily's father would help Walter with repairs around the property, while her mother brought casseroles and taught Walter how to prepare proper food for growing puppies. "Have you seen her again?" Lily asked one afternoon, as she and Walter sat on the porch steps, watching the puppies chase butterflies in the yard. There was no need to specify who "her" was. Walter shook his head. "Forest rangers say she's still around. They've spotted her near the ridge a few times, but she keeps her distance now." He smiled softly. She did what she needed to do. "Do you think she misses them?" Lily asked, her young heart still troubled by the thought of the mother bear returning to her solitude. "I reckon she thinks about them," Walter replied thoughtfully. "Same way I still think about Catherine every day. But I'd like to believe she finds some peace knowing they're safe." He gazed at the puppies with undisguised affection. "That they have a home." As if sensing they were being discussed, Hope bounded up the steps and placed her head on Walter's knee, her brown eyes gazing up at him with complete trust. Faith and Charity followed, surrounding the old man with their exuberant energy and unconditional love. Walter's hand, no longer trembling but now steady and sure, stroked Hope's soft fur. "Catherine always said that animals have souls," he told Lily, his voice gentle with memory. "I didn't believe her then. Thought it was just her soft heart talking." He looked out toward the forest, where somewhere among the trees a mother bear continued her solitary existence. "Now I'm not so sure. That bear made a choice that day, a choice that changed everything." Lily nodded, understanding deeper truths than many adults ever grasp. "Sometimes the ones who've suffered the most have the most compassion to give," she said, unconsciously echoing words her father had once spoken to her. Walter glanced at her, surprised by her insight. "You're a wise one, Lily Morgan. Your parents should be proud." "They're proud of you too, Mr. Green," she replied with a smile. "Everyone is. You could have ignored what happened, but you chose to change." Walter's weather-beaten face creased in a smile that erased years of bitterness. "Well, it's like I had a pretty clear sign, didn't I? If a wild bear can find it in her heart to save these little ones, what excuse did I have?" As the afternoon mellowed into evening, Lily prepared to head home, slinging her ever-present camera over her shoulder. Before leaving, she took one more photograph. Walter, surrounded by his 3 growing puppies, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in decades. This image wouldn't make national magazines or viral internet stories. This was just for them, a quiet documentation of healing that had begun with an act of cruelty but blossomed into something beautiful. "I'll be back tomorrow," Lily promised, heading down the path that led to her family's cabin. "We'll be here," Walter replied. "Hope, Faith, and Charity clustered around his legs as they watched her go. As Lily walked home through the gathering dusk, she thought she glimpsed a large shadow moving parallel to her path, just inside the tree line. She paused, her heart quickening as she peered into the deepening shadows. For a moment, she caught the gleam of watchful eyes, a massive silhouette standing sentinel among the trees. Lily raised her hand in a small wave, a gesture of gratitude and acknowledgement. The shadow remained still for a heartbeat, then two, before melting back into the forest depths. She smiled to herself and continued homeward, carrying the knowledge that sometimes the most profound connections are formed across the boundaries we create, between wild and tame, between young and old, between loss and healing. And sometimes the most important lessons about humanity come from those who aren't human at all. Deep in the forest, Old Mama continued her solitary journey, carrying her own memories of small furry bodies that once huddled against her for protection. Perhaps, in her bear's heart, she understood that she had not only saved 3 tiny lives, but had also awakened compassion in a human heart that had forgotten how to care. And perhaps that was enough. 6 months passed, and autumn painted the forest in brilliant shades of crimson and gold. The puppies had grown into strong, healthy young dogs, their playful antics bringing daily joy to Walter's once lonely existence. Hope, the smallest of the trio with her distinctive white paws, had developed an uncanny intelligence that sometimes gave Walter pause. She would often stand at the forest's edge, staring into the trees as if listening for a voice only she could hear. Faith, the middle pup with her alert ears, had become an excellent tracker, while Charity, the largest with the black patch over one eye, was the gentle protector of the 3. The story of the bear and the puppies had spread far beyond their small town. A documentary filmmaker had visited over the summer, capturing footage of the now famous dogs and interviewing both Walter and Lily about their extraordinary experience. Walter had initially resisted the attention, but Lily convinced him that sharing their story might help others understand the complex connections between humans and the natural world. Sometimes miracles need witnesses, she had told him, with that wisdom that continued to surprise the old man. But fame brought unexpected consequences. One crisp October morning, Walter awoke to the sound of unfamiliar vehicles approaching his cabin. Looking out the window, he saw 3 large trucks rumbling up his driveway, bearing the logo of Northland Timber Company. His heart sank as he recognized the man stepping out of the lead vehicle. Jackson Mercer, a logging magnate known for his aggressive expansion throughout the region. Walter quickly dressed and stepped onto his porch, the 3 dogs forming a protective line in front of him. They sensed his tension, their bodies alert but not aggressive. "Morning, Green," Mercer called, his booming voice shattering the peaceful forest air. "Hope you don't mind the early visit." "Depends on why you're here, Mercer," Walter replied coolly. He, the businessman, had crossed paths before, years ago, when Mercer had first tried to purchase timber rights to the forest that bordered Walter's property, the very forest where Old Mama roamed. Mercer smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll get right to the point. County records show you own 50 acres backing up to state forest land." He gestured toward the trees behind the cabin. "I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer for those acres. Timber's at premium prices right now." Walter's jaw tightened. "Not interested." "You haven't heard the figure yet," Mercer said, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. "Take a look before you decide." He held out the paper, and Walter reluctantly stepped forward to take it. His eyes widened slightly at the number written there. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life, to renovate his cabin properly, to ensure the dogs would always be well cared for. For a moment, Walter was tempted. The money would solve so many problems. But then, Hope pressed against his leg, looking up at him with those knowing brown eyes, and he remembered the mother bear, her silent presence somewhere in those woods, her act of compassion that had changed everything. "Still not interested," Walter said firmly, handing the paper back. "That forest isn't just trees to be cut down, Mercer. It's home to countless creatures, including a very special bear." Mercer's face hardened. "Ah, yes. I've heard about your famous bear story." His tone made it clear what he thought of the tale. "Look, Green, I understand you've become attached to your little wildlife sanctuary, but be reasonable. That bear will find another territory, and you'll be set for life." "The answer is no," Walter replied, straightening his back despite the arthritis that plagued him on cold mornings. "Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave my property." Mercer's pleasant facade cracked for a moment, revealing the ruthless businessman beneath. "This isn't over, Green. That logging contract is going forward one way or another." He glanced at the dogs, his lip curling slightly. "Even miracle puppies need to eat, don't they? Think about that when winter comes." Without waiting for a response, he turned and strode back to his truck, barking orders at his men. The vehicles roared to life and backed down the driveway, leaving swirls of fallen leaves in their wake. Walter watched them go, a cold knot of worry forming in his stomach. He knew Mercer's reputation. The man didn't take rejection well, and he had connections throughout the county. If he couldn't buy Walter's land, he might find other ways to get what he wanted. That afternoon, Lily arrived for her regular visit, immediately sensing something was wrong. Walter told her about Mercer's offer and his thinly veiled threat. "He can't cut down the forest," Lily said, her young face flushed with indignation. "It's protected, isn't it?" Walter sighed, settling into his porch chair. "My 50 acres aren't protected, Lily. And the state forest beyond has been opened for selective logging. Mercer's got those contracts locked up tight." "But what about Old Mama and all the other animals?" Lily's voice rose with concern. "That's what I'm worried about," Walter admitted. "Once those logging operations start, they'll drive wildlife out of their territories. Some will adapt, but others—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Lily understood. Old Mama might be forced to seek new hunting grounds, possibly bringing her into conflict with humans less sympathetic than Walter. "We have to do something," Lily insisted, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck. "We can't let them destroy her home after what she did for us. For them." She nodded toward the 3 dogs, who lay peacefully in the autumn sunshine, unaware of the threat to their wild mother's domain. Walter nodded slowly, an idea forming. "Your photographs, Lily, the ones of Old Mama saving the puppies, and the documentary footage. Maybe we could use them to show people why this forest matters." Lily's eyes brightened. "We could start a petition. My dad knows someone at the Environmental Protection Office in the state capitol, and I bet the documentary people would help too." For the first time since Mercer's visit, Walter felt a spark of hope. "It's worth a try, isn't it?" What neither of them noticed was Hope. Standing at attention near the forest's edge, her ears pricked forward, listening intently. A low, barely audible rumble echoed from the distant trees. Not thunder, but something else. Something that made the young dog's fur stand on end. Miles away, deep in the state forest, chainsaws had already begun their destructive work. The logging had begun sooner than anyone expected, and the forest's inhabitants were on the move, including a large female bear, driven from her familiar territory by the deafening noise and falling trees. Old Mama was coming closer to human settlement than she had ventured in months, following an ancient path that would lead her directly to Walter's cabin, and into potential danger from those who wouldn't understand her special connection to the old man and his dogs. The battle for the forest had begun, but it was about to become far more complicated than either Walter or Lily could have imagined. For Old Mama wasn't traveling alone. Trailing behind her, struggling to keep pace with her powerful mother, were two small cubs, new babies who had come into her life during the spring, helping to heal the wound of her previous loss. And now, these cubs too were in danger from the encroaching machines. As darkness fell over the forest, Walter sat on his porch, the three dogs gathered around him. In the distance, if he listened carefully, he could hear the faint mechanical growl of chainsaws, a sound that would grow louder with each passing day. Hope suddenly rose to her feet, her gaze fixed on the tree line, a low whine building in her throat. "What is it, girl?" Walter asked, following her intent stare. "What do you hear?" At the edge of his property, where forest shadow met moonlight, something large moved in the darkness. Walter's breath caught as a familiar silhouette emerged, the massive form of Old Mama, her fur silvered by moonlight. But she wasn't alone. Two smaller shapes huddled close to her legs, their eyes reflecting the cabin's distant light. "Well, I'll be," Walter whispered, hardly daring to move. "She's brought her family to us." Hope barked once, not in alarm but in recognition. The sound seemed to hang in the night air, a greeting across species, a remembrance of that day in the forest when compassion had bridged the divide between wild and tame. Old Mama stood her ground, watching the cabin with those knowing eyes. She had returned, bringing her most precious possessions, her cubs, to the only human she had ever trusted. It was as if she understood that her forest sanctuary was vanishing, and had made a desperate choice to seek help from the strange, two-legged creature who had once received her gift of mercy. Walter slowly rose from his chair, his heart pounding with a mixture of awe and dread. How could he protect this magnificent creature and her babies from Mercer's chainsaws? What would happen when loggers encountered a mother bear defending her young? As if sensing his thoughts, Hope pressed against his leg, looking up with an expression that seemed to say, "We will find a way." The old man nodded, a resolve hardening within him that he hadn't felt in decades. "Yes," he said aloud, his voice strong in the night air. "We will." In that moment, with Old Mama and her cubs at the forest's edge and his three dogs standing alert beside him, Walter made a promise. To the animals, to Lily, to his beloved Catherine, and to himself. This forest would not fall, not while he had breath in his body and a debt of compassion yet to repay. Dawn broke with a sense of urgency. Walter had spent most of the night on his porch, watching as Old Mama and her cubs retreated to the relative safety of the forest's edge, visible occasionally as shadows moving between the trees. He hadn't slept, his mind racing with possible ways to protect them from Mercer's advancing operation. As first light spread across the sky, Walter heard the familiar sound of Lily's bicycle tires on the gravel driveway. She wasn't due for a visit until afternoon, and her early arrival confirmed his suspicion that something significant had happened. "Mr. Green," she called, dropping her bike and rushing toward the porch, her face flushed with exertion and excitement. "You won't believe what's happening in town." Walter gestured for her to catch her breath. "Slow down, Lily. What's going on?" "It's your story, our story," she gasped, pulling her tablet from her backpack. "The documentary aired on the National Wildlife Channel last night, and it's gone viral. Look." She thrust the tablet at Walter, showing him a social media page where the viewing numbers for The Bear's Gift, a true story of wilderness compassion, had climbed into the millions overnight. Comments poured in from around the world, people expressing amazement and emotion at the footage of Old Mama freeing the puppies and the subsequent transformation in Walter's life. "That's not all," Lily continued breathlessly. There's a hashtag trending. #Save Old Mama's Forest. People are calling the governor's office, demanding that the logging permits be reviewed, and Mr. Mercer's company is getting flooded with messages. Walter stared at the tablet in disbelief. All this happened overnight? Lily nodded vigorously. The timing couldn't be better. Dad says there's already a news crew heading this way. They want to interview you and see where it all happened. For a moment, Walter felt overwhelmed. He was a private man who had spent decades avoiding attention, and now he was at the center of a media storm. But then he thought of old Mama and her cubs hiding at the forest's edge, of the chainsaws that had already begun their destructive work, and he knew this unexpected spotlight might be their only chance. "Lily," he said quietly, "old Mama came back last night. She has cubs now, 2 of them. She brought them here, right to the edge of my property." Lily's eyes widened. "Cubs? She has babies?" Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if the bears might hear. "Where are they?" Walter pointed toward the dense stand of trees where he had last seen them. "They're staying close. I think she knows something's wrong in her territory. She came here for help, Lily." Determination hardened the girl's young features. "Then we have to help her. This changes everything. If people find out old Mama has cubs and that she came to you." "The logging has already started," Walter interrupted grimly. "I heard the chainsaws yesterday. Mercer's not waiting for anyone's permission." Lily's expression faltered momentarily, then strengthened with resolve. "Then we need to move fast. The news crew will be here by noon. We should show them where the logging is happening. And if we're really lucky, maybe they could film old Mama and her cubs from a safe distance." Walter shook his head worriedly. "That's risky, Lily. Old Mama might be tolerant of me and the dogs because of what happened, but a group of strangers with cameras might frighten her into aggression, especially with cubs to protect." "Then what do we do?" Lily asked, frustration edging her voice. Before Walter could answer, Hope gave a sharp bark from the yard. Both turned to see all 3 dogs standing at alert, facing the driveway where a cloud of dust announced the arrival of more vehicles. "Visitors already?" Walter muttered, squinting at the approaching cars. To his surprise, the lead vehicle was the sheriff's SUV, followed by 2 trucks from the Department of Wildlife Management. Sheriff Dan Collins, a man Walter had known casually for years, stepped out first, his expression grave. "Walter," he called, approaching the porch. "We need to talk. Mercer filed a complaint this morning, claiming you threatened his logging crew." Walter's mouth fell open. "What? I haven't left my property in days." The sheriff nodded, as if he'd expected this response. "I figured as much, but I had to check." "Mercer's playing hardball. Says one of his men spotted you near their equipment last night with, and I quote, 'those dangerous dogs of yours.'" "That's a lie," Walter said firmly. "I was right here all night. The dogs never left the yard." He hesitated, then decided to trust the sheriff with the truth. "I had a different visitor altogether. One of the wildlife officers, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and Dr. Elena Rodriguez embroidered on her jacket, stepped forward. Mr. Green, we received reports of a female bear with cubs sighted near your property. Given your unique history with this particular bear, we thought it best to come directly to you." Walter exchanged glances with Lily, then nodded slowly. "She was here last night, at the edge of the forest. She has 2 cubs now." Dr. Rodriguez's professional composure slipped slightly, revealing genuine interest. "The same bear from the documentary? You're certain?" "Positive," Walter confirmed. "She stood right there, looking at me and the dogs, Hope, The smallest puppy she saved recognized her immediately. The second wildlife officer, a younger man with a clipboard, was scribbling notes rapidly. "This is unprecedented documented behavior," he murmured. Sheriff Collins cleared his throat. "That's not all, Walter. Mercer's filed for an emergency injunction to force you off your property for the duration of the logging operation. Claims you're a safety risk." "He can't do that," Lily protested. "This is Mr. Green's land." "He's got friends in high places," the sheriff replied grimly. "Normally, it wouldn't stand a chance, but with the bear sightings, well, that complicates things. The county could claim there's a public safety issue." Walter's hands clenched into fists. "This is about the logging contract. Mercer offered to buy my land yesterday, and I refused. Now he's trying to force me out another way." Dr. Rodriguez exchanged meaningful glances with her colleague. "Mr. Green, the presence of a mother bear with cubs changes the legal situation considerably. If we can verify this is the same bear from the documentary, she could potentially be classified as a bear of special scientific interest due to her unusual behavioral patterns." Hope suddenly barked again, more urgently this time. All heads turned toward the forest's edge, where old Mama had emerged into the early morning light. She stood tall on her hind legs, perhaps 30 yards from the group, her cubs visible as small shadows behind her. The wildlife officers froze, their training telling them not to make sudden movements. "She's not aggressive," Walter said softly. "She's trying to show us something." Dr. Rodriguez slowly raised her binoculars. "There's something wrong with her left side," she whispered. "Is that blood?" Walter's heart sank as he saw what the wildlife officer had noticed. A dark stain on old Mama's brown fur, just behind her left shoulder. The bear dropped to all fours with a visible wince, confirming she was injured. "Someone shot her," Dr. Rodriguez said, her professional tone hardening with anger. "Recently, within the last day or two." The younger wildlife officer was already reaching for his radio. "I'll call for the veterinary response team." "Wait," Walter said, thinking quickly. "If officials come rushing in, she'll retreat deeper into the forest. We might lose her entirely." He looked at Hope, who was straining toward the bear, whining softly. "I have an idea, but you'll need to trust me." Everyone watched in tense silence as Walter slowly descended the porch steps, Hope at his side. The other 2 dogs remained on the porch, as if understanding that this moment belonged to their smaller sibling. "Walter, be careful," the sheriff cautioned, his hand hovering near his sidearm. Not to threaten the bear, but as a last resort if things went wrong. Walter ignored him, his focus entirely on old Mama. He spoke in a low, soothing voice as he and Hope approached, stopping about 15 yards from where the bear stood protectively before her cubs. "I know you're hurt," Walter said, not caring if the others thought him foolish for talking to a wild animal. "We want to help you, the way you helped these little ones." He gestured to Hope, who sat obediently at his side, her intelligent eyes fixed on the bear who had once been her savior. For a long, breathless moment nothing happened. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, Hope broke from Walter's side and trotted forward, stopping halfway between the old man and the injured bear. She sat down again, her posture relaxed, her tail sweeping the ground in a gentle wag. It was an invitation, a bridge between worlds. Old Mama made a soft chuffing sound to her cubs, who immediately retreated a few steps into the underbrush. Then, with obvious pain in her movements, she lumbered forward to meet Hope in the middle ground, between wilderness and civilization. Dr. Rodriguez gasped audibly as the massive bear lowered her head to the dog's level, their noses almost touching in a greeting that defied every natural instinct of these ancestral enemies. Hope whined softly, then turned and trotted back to Walter, looking over her shoulder as if to say, "Follow me." "She's bringing old Mama to us," Lily whispered, her camera forgotten in her hands, as she witnessed a moment no photograph could fully capture. Incredibly, the bear followed Hope, maintaining a cautious distance from Walter but clearly responding to the dog's invitation. As she drew closer, the injury became more visible, a bullet wound that had torn through the muscle of her shoulder, not immediately life-threatening but painful and potentially dangerous if infection set in. "Mr. Green," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, "what we're seeing is scientifically significant on multiple levels. This bear is demonstrating cognitive abilities and interspecies trust that could revolutionize our understanding of ursine intelligence." Walter barely heard her. His attention focused on the extraordinary tableau before him, a wounded wild bear voluntarily approaching humans, guided by a dog she had once rescued from abandonment. In that moment, the tangled threads of fate that had brought them all together seemed to pull tighter, weaving a story that transcended the boundaries between species. "We need to help her," Walter said finally, breaking the spell of wonder that had fallen over the group. "She trusted us enough to come here. We can't let her down." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, her professional demeanor returning. "We can sedate her safely, treat the wound, and release her once she's stable. But those cubs complicate matters. They're too young to survive alone, even for a day." "They can stay in my shed," Walter offered immediately. "It's secure, and we can make it comfortable until their mother recovers." The younger wildlife officer looked skeptical. "Sir, with all due respect, those are wild bear cubs. They're not puppies." "I know that," Walter replied evenly. "But these aren't ordinary circumstances." He looked pointedly at Hope, who still stood between him and old Mama, a living bridge of trust. Dr. Rodriguez made a quick decision. "Let's get the veterinary team here, but keep it small. Just the essentials. Mr. Green, if you're willing to help us, I think we might have a chance to treat this bear without causing additional trauma to the family unit." The sheriff, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing amazement, finally spoke up. "And what about Mercer's complaint?" "His injunction?" Dr. Rodriguez straightened, authority radiating from her petite frame. "Sheriff, I'm declaring this property a temporary wildlife management zone under Section 47 of the State Conservation Act. Mr. Green's presence is essential to our operation, given his unique relationship with this bear. The injunction will have to wait." Relief washed over Walter's face. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Dr. Rodriguez cautioned. "This is temporary. But if we can document what we're seeing here, a wounded wild bear voluntarily seeking human assistance through the mediation of a domestic dog, it strengthens the case for permanent protection of both the bear and her habitat." Lily, who had been filming discreetly with her phone, stepped forward. "I've got it all recorded, and there's more from before you arrived." The veterinary team arrived 30 minutes later, moving with the quiet efficiency of professionals accustomed to treating wild animals. Old Mama, remarkably, remained near the edge of the property, occasionally checking on her cubs hidden in the underbrush but never retreating entirely. It was as if she understood that these humans represented her best chance of survival. The sedation process was tense but successful, with Hope playing an unexpectedly crucial role. The small dog stayed near old Mama until the tranquilizer took effect, seeming to reassure the bear that she was among friends. Once old Mama was unconscious, the veterinarians worked quickly to clean and treat the bullet wound. "Small caliber," the lead vet commented, examining the extracted bullet. likely fired from a distance. Not a hunting rifle, more like a warning shot that unfortunately found its mark. "Mercer's men," Walter said grimly. "They've been clearing the edge of my property line." The sheriff took the bullet in an evidence bag. "I'll look into it. Shooting a bear out of season is a serious offense, even more so if it was on your land without permission." With Old Mama safely sedated and receiving treatment, the next challenge was securing her cubs. Guided by Hope's uncanny ability to approach the young bears without frightening them, Walter and the wildlife team managed to coax the cubs into the shed, which had been hastily converted into a temporary den with blankets, water, and a secure door. By mid-afternoon, Old Mama was recovering in a shaded area near the forest's edge, an IV delivering antibiotics and fluids to her massive body. Her cubs, initially distressed by their mother's absence, had settled in the shed under the watchful eyes of Hope, who had refused to leave their side. Faith and Charity patrolled the perimeter of the property, as if they understood the importance of keeping other animals away during this delicate time. She should wake up within the next few hours, Dr. Rodriguez informed Walter as they sat on his porch, watching the scene. The wound wasn't as bad as it looked. The bullet passed through muscle without hitting anything vital. Bears are incredibly resilient. Walter nodded, relieved but still worried. And then what? She goes back to a forest that's being cut down around her? Before Dr. Rodriguez could answer, the rumble of approaching vehicles drew their attention once more. This time, it was the promised news crew, accompanied by several more cars and even a bus that appeared to be full of people. "What in the world?" Walter muttered, rising to his feet. Lily, who had been helping monitor the bear cubs, came running from the shed. "It's started," she exclaimed. "The protest. I posted what happened this morning, and people have been organizing all day." As they watched in astonishment, dozens of people began to disembark from the vehicles, many carrying signs with slogans like "Save Old Mama's Forest" and "Compassion has no species." The news crew was already setting up cameras, capturing the spontaneous demonstration that had formed at the edge of Walter's property. A woman in a crisp suit approached the porch, her hand extended. "Mr. Green, I'm Diane Foster, environmental attorney. Your story has ignited a movement, sir." Walter shook her hand, bewildered by the rapid turn of events. "I don't understand. How did all these people get here so quickly?" "Social media moves at the speed of light," Diane explained with a smile. When news broke that Old Mama had returned, with cubs no less, and was injured by logging operations, it created the perfect storm of public outrage. "We've already filed an emergency injunction against Northland Timber's permits pending a full environmental impact review." As if on cue, another vehicle arrived, Jackson Mercer's sleek black SUV. The businessman stepped out, his face a thundercloud as he surveyed the crowd of protesters and media that had descended on the remote property. "Green!" he bellowed, pushing through the throng. "What the hell kind of circus have you orchestrated here?" Walter stood his ground on the porch steps, feeling stronger than he had in years. "No circus, Mercer. Just people who believe some things are more important than profit." Mercer's face reddened. "This is a business matter, not some fairy tale about a bear saving puppies. You can't stop progress with sentimental nonsense." "Actually, Mr. Mercer," Diane Foster interjected smoothly, stepping beside Walter, "the law provides quite a few ways to stop progress when it threatens endangered species or animals of special scientific interest, which, as of this morning, includes this particular bear and her habitat." "What endangered species?" Mercer scoffed. "That's a common black bear." Dr. Rodriguez joined them, her clipboard in hand. Black bears aren't endangered, that's correct. But this bear is now classified as a subject of significant scientific research due to her demonstrated cognitive abilities and interspecies altruism, behaviors that are revolutionizing our understanding of ursine intelligence. That's ridiculous, Mercer sputtered. You can't create a special classification for one bear just because it had an unusual interaction with some dogs. Actually, we can, Dr. Rodriguez replied calmly. And we have. The department has granted temporary protected status to this bear family pending further study. Any logging activity within a 3-mile radius of their documented territory is suspended effective immediately. Walter watched as Mercer's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally calculation. The businessman was nothing if not adaptable. "Fine," he said after a moment, straightening his tie. "We'll move our operation elsewhere for now. But this isn't Overgreen. Sentimentality doesn't hold up in court for long." As Mercer stormed back to his vehicle, the crowd of protesters cheered. Someone started a chant, "Old Mama! Old Mama!" The news crew captured it all, ensuring that the story would spread even further by evening. Amid the commotion, Lily tugged at Walter's sleeve. "Mr. Green, come quickly. She's waking up." Leaving the noise and celebration behind, Walter followed Lily to where Old Mama lay under a tent-like structure the veterinary team had erected. The massive bear was indeed stirring, her great head lifting slightly as the sedation wore off. Hope, who had briefly left the cubs to check on their mother, approached cautiously, whining softly. She lay down just beyond reach of the bear's paws, her head on her outstretched legs, watching with those intelligent brown eyes. "Hey there, old girl," Walter said softly, crouching at a safe distance. "You're going to be just fine. Your babies are safe too." As if understanding his words, Old Mama's eyes found his, holding his gaze with that same impossible communication they had shared that day in the forest months ago. There was pain in those dark eyes, but also something else. Recognition, perhaps even gratitude. Dr. Rodriguez, observing from nearby, shook her head in wonder. "In 20 years of wildlife management, I've never seen anything like this relationship. We're going to need to completely reevaluate our understanding of interspecies dynamics." "She's thanking him," Lily said simply, her young voice certain, "just like he's thanking her." Walter nodded, understanding the truth of Lily's words. The circle of compassion that had begun with a mother bear freeing abandoned puppies had expanded, widened, returned upon itself. Old Mama had given him back his capacity to care. Now he was returning the favor by protecting her and her cubs from those who would destroy their home. Old Mama struggled to rise, concerned about her cubs despite her weakened state. Walter gently addressed her again, his voice low and calming. "They're safe," he repeated. "Hope is watching over them, just like you watched over her. Rest now. Heal." Whether it was his tone or some deeper understanding, the bear settled back down, her massive head resting on her paws as she continued to recover from the sedation and treatment. In the background, the sounds of protest and media coverage continued, a human clamor that seemed distant and unimportant compared to the silent communication happening between an old man, a small dog, and a mother bear. 3 beings whose lives had become intertwined through an act of unexpected mercy. 1 year later, the visitor center stood at the edge of what was now officially named Old Mama's Sanctuary, a protected wilderness area that encompassed Walter's property and 5,000 acres of surrounding forest. Its rustic wooden architecture blended harmoniously with the landscape, large windows offering views of the trees and mountains beyond. Inside, a life-sized bronze statue of a mother bear with 3 German shepherd puppies drew the eye immediately, positioned beneath Lily Morgan's famous photograph, the image that had changed everything. Walter Green, looking healthier than he had in decades, guided a group of schoolchildren through the center's main exhibit hall. At 76, he had found an unexpected second career as the sanctuary's primary educator and storyteller. The children listened, wide-eyed, as he recounted the now famous tale of Old Mama and the abandoned puppies. "And that's why we must always remember," Walter concluded, his voice gentle but firm, "that compassion isn't just a human quality. Sometimes the greatest teachers of kindness have 4 legs instead of 2. As the children asked eager questions, Lily, now 14 and the sanctuary's youngest junior ranger, slipped through the back door, her expression a mixture of excitement and awe. "Mr. Green," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "She's back, with all 3 of them." Walter's heart leaped. It had been nearly 2 months since they'd last spotted Old Mama and her cubs, now gangly yearlings learning to forage under their mother's watchful eye. The bear family roamed freely throughout the protected wilderness, their movements tracked by non-invasive wildlife cameras that had provided groundbreaking data for Dr. Rodriguez's ongoing research. "Excuse me, children," Walter said, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "It seems we have some very special visitors today. If you'll follow Ranger Morgan to the observation deck, you might see something extraordinary." Hope, Faith, and Charity, now full-grown, magnificent dogs, waited at the center's rear entrance, their bodies quivering with anticipation. They had developed an uncanny sense for when Old Mama was nearby, often alerting the sanctuary staff before the wildlife cameras caught sight of her. Walter followed the children and Lily to the observation deck, a carefully designed platform that allowed visitors to view wildlife without disturbing them. Dr. Rodriguez was already there, her binoculars trained on the forest edge where a familiar massive brown form could be seen lumbering into a nearby meadow, 3 smaller bears following in her wake. "She looks healthy," Dr. Rodriguez noted with professional satisfaction. "The yearlings are developing perfectly." Walter nodded, a lump forming in his throat as he watched the bear family move confidently through their protected domain. Old Mama had fully recovered from her bullet wound, the only reminder a slight hitch in her gait when she was tired. Her cubs had grown tremendously, learning from their remarkable mother how to coexist in a world where wilderness and humanity intersected. "Do the dogs still visit her?" asked a small girl, her face pressed against the viewing glass. Walter smiled. "Not as often now. They understand she needs to teach her cubs to be wild bears. But sometimes, when she comes close to the sanctuary boundary—" He didn't finish the sentence, not wanting to anthropomorphize too much for the impressionable children. But Lily had no such reservations. "They have reunions," she said confidently. "Hope always knows when Old Mama wants to see her. They meet at the big oak tree, where it all started. I've seen them sitting together, just being quiet, like old friends catching up." The children sighed collectively at this romantic notion, while Dr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow but didn't contradict the girl. The truth was, the relationship between the bear and the dogs, particularly Hope, continued to defy scientific explanation. The ongoing documentation of their interactions had been published in prestigious wildlife journals, challenging long-held beliefs about the rigid boundaries between wild and domestic animals. As they watched, Old Mama suddenly rose onto her hind legs, her nose testing the air. She looked directly toward the observation deck as if she knew they were there. "She's saying hello," whispered one awestruck child. "Maybe she is," Walter agreed, raising his hand in a small wave that he knew the bear couldn't possibly see at this distance. Yet somehow, he felt she understood the gesture all the same. The bear family continued their forage across the meadow, eventually disappearing back into the dense forest that would remain their protected home for generations to come. The children chattered excitedly as Lily led them back inside for craft activities, leaving Walter alone on the deck with Dr. Rodriguez. The Mercer appeal was denied, by the way, she informed him, putting away her binoculars. The Supreme Court refused to hear the case. The sanctuary's status is secure. Walter nodded, satisfaction warming his heart. Jackson Mercer had fought the sanctuary's establishment every step of the way, but public sentiment had overwhelmingly supported the protection of Old Mama's territory. The timber magnate had eventually been forced to accept defeat, though rumors persisted that he still held a grudge against the old man and the bear who had derailed his plans. Catherine would have loved all this, Walter said quietly, more to himself than to the wildlife officer. Dr. Rodriguez smiled gently. Your wife must have been a remarkable woman. She was, Walter confirmed, gazing out at the forest that had become his life's unexpected legacy. She always believed animals had souls, that they were capable of more than we gave them credit for. His weathered hand touched the wedding ring he still wore after all these years. I wish she could have seen Old Mama, could have known that she was right all along. I think she knows, Dr. Rodriguez said, surprising herself with the uncharacteristically sentimental statement. Walter appreciated the kind words, but his scientific companion had no idea how true they might be. He had never told anyone, not even Lily, about the dream that had come to him the night after Old Mama was treated for her gunshot wound. In it, Catherine had stood at the forest's edge, young and beautiful as when they'd first met, her hand resting on the great bear's head. You remembered how to love, she had told him, her voice as clear as if she were standing beside him. That's all I ever wanted for you. He had awakened with tears on his face but peace in his heart, understanding at last that his grief had nearly cost him his humanity, the very quality Catherine had loved most in him. Old Mama, in her wild wisdom, had reminded him of what it meant to care for something beyond himself. That evening, after the visitor center had closed and the last tourist had departed, Walter sat on his porch with his 3 faithful dogs beside him. His cabin, now incorporated into the sanctuary grounds, remained his private residence, a quiet haven away from the public areas. A familiar figure on a bicycle came up the path. Lily, finished with her junior ranger duties for the day. Mind if I join you? She called, propping her bike against the railing. Always welcome, Walter replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. In the distance, an owl called, announcing the transition from day to night in the ancient forest. Do you ever think about how different things would be if Old Mama hadn't found those puppies that day? Lily asked suddenly. If she had just walked past them, or she didn't finish the darker alternative, but Walter understood. I think about it every day, he admitted. One small act of mercy changed everything. For them, for me, for this whole forest. He gestured toward the trees, now preserved for perpetuity. Catherine used to say that compassion is the most powerful force in the universe, that it can cross any boundary, heal any wound. She was right, Lily said simply. From the edge of the forest came a low, rumbling sound, not threatening, but a gentle acknowledgement, a reminder of a presence that moved through the shadows with purpose and awareness. Hope's ears perked up immediately, and she rose to her feet, her gaze fixed on the tree line. Walter and Lily exchanged glances, sharing a silent understanding. Some connections needed no explanation, no scientific validation. They simply existed, bridging worlds that were meant to remain separate, but somehow had found common ground in the language of compassion. As darkness settled over the sanctuary, stars emerging in the velvet sky above, Walter Green felt a sense of completion he had never thought possible after losing Catherine. The emptiness that had consumed him for so long had been filled with something unexpected, not a replacement for his beloved wife, but a new purpose born from the most unlikely of sources. A wild mother bear had taught him to care again. 3 abandoned puppies had shown him the meaning of resilience, and a young girl with a camera had helped him share that miracle with the world. Hope gave a soft whine, still staring into the darkness where old Mama and her cubs made their nightly rounds of their territory. Walter reached down to stroke her head, feeling the connection that flowed through all of them. Man, dog, bear, forest. An unbroken circle of compassion that had begun with a simple act of mercy and expanded to save an entire ecosystem. "Good night, old friend," he whispered to the unseen presence in the trees. "Thank you for the gift." And somewhere in the velvet darkness, a mother bear paused in her eternal vigil, perhaps remembering the day when she had chosen kindness over instinct, mercy over nature's harsh law. In that choice, she had not only saved 3 tiny lives but had awakened compassion in a human heart that had forgotten how to care, proving that sometimes the most profound lessons in humanity come from those who are not human at all.